A 4-year-old boy watched armed men take over the capital. Intelligence officers snapped to attention. Steel rifles clattered as the personal guard formed a tight ring around the child. They treated his father like a living god. Uday was born on June 18, 1964, in Baghdad. But a normal childhood vanished in 1968, when the Ba'ath Party launched a violent coup. The lesson was simple. Power meant taking what you wanted. No one asked questions. By 1979, Saddam Hussein officially took the presidency. He seized tight control over a nation of nearly 13 million people. The boy observed every step of this takeover. He saw how fear ruled the streets. Survival required total obedience. Disloyalty to his father meant prison or a firing squad. Surrounded by terrified loyalists, nobody ever told the boy no. Formally, he was enrolled as a student at the University of Baghdad. In reality, his only actual classroom was a world of power without limits. Servants met every demand instantly, and guards ignored every misbehavior because they valued their own lives. By the late 1970s, the scale of his entitlement became obvious. He started drinking heavily, a shocking habit in an Islamic country that traditionally restricted alcohol. He constantly reeked of expensive imported alcohol while interacting with senior officials. The liquor fueled a mind that was already unstable and prone to violent outbursts. People quickly learned to navigate his unpredictable anger, knowing any wrong move could be fatal. The aggression multiplied as he realized his actions carried zero consequences. He genuinely enjoyed watching grown men shake with fear when he entered a room. Then the validation arrived. In 1984, Saddam Hussein handed his 20-year-old son the first real levers of state control. In 1984, the new power found a physical shape. 20. That was the exact age when Uday took complete control over the Iraqi Olympic Committee and the National Football Federation. The government handed him a prestigious sporting institution. He immediately turned it into a testing ground for human endurance. The main Olympic headquarters sat in the bustling Al-Kark district. Traffic flowed normally outside. Inside the concrete walls, the sports complex became a secret prison right in the center of the capital. State infrastructure now existed solely to legalize his personal violence. The terror peaked during international qualifiers. In 1986, the national team fought to reach the tournament in Mexico. Matches ran at Al-Shab Stadium under the gaze of 40,000 spectators. But the real game happened away from the pitch. During a disastrous halftime, the locker room wall phone rang loudly. The coach slowly passed the heavy receiver to the team captain. Uday screamed through the static. He promised to amputate their legs below the knee. He threatened to feed the entire squad to his hungry dogs. Players stared at the concrete floor in blind panic. Sweat turned freezing cold on their skin. The threats carried literal weight. Losing a match stopped being a sporting failure. It became a criminal offense. Uday managed the violence with strict bureaucratic precision. He kept a thick personal notebook right on his heavy wooden desk. His pen methodically recorded specific punishments next to each athlete's name. A missed penalty kick meant 50 lashes with a thick electrical cable. A poor defensive pass earned 3 days in a cramped holding cell without clean water. He wrote every single detail down. Pain became a standard administrative procedure. Fear entirely replaced training schedules. Armed guards dragged failed squads straight from the field to the basement cells of the committee building. In a sprawling capital of almost 4 million people, no police officer dared to intervene. The state gave him the budget, the buildings, and the authority to break human bodies. He did not manage the athletes, he owned them outright. One national squad player later confessed he waited for an early death every single day. But this fear didn't stay locked inside the stadiums. Uday's guards actively scanned Baghdad's restaurants and nightclubs, looking for new targets. They spotted a young woman eating dinner. 2 armed men walked straight up to her table. they delivered a simple message. Moments later, she vanished into his waiting motorcade. Baghdad held over 4 million residents during that period, yet not a single family could shield their daughters from his armored convoys. The black cars drove straight to his private pleasure palaces. Outside, luxury water fountains sprayed into the air. They masked the reality of the compounds. Inside, these sprawling estates concealed dedicated interrogation rooms. Fear replaced any illusion of a high society party. His enforcers dragged women in through extreme social pressure or outright abduction. Once the heavy doors closed, escape became impossible. If a woman resisted, his inner circle beat her into submission right on the floor. His terror ran deeper than physical violence. His men set up video equipment in the bedrooms. They recorded the assaults. Afterward, his enforcers delivered these tapes directly to the victims' parents. They used the footage as permanent leverage. The threat of public shame guaranteed their silence. No father went to the police. The danger quickly spilled out of the private clubs and spread across the daily life of the capital. Anyone could become a target on a sudden whim. If a civilian driver failed to yield fast enough to Uday's cars, the man simply disappeared. Minor traffic disputes escalated into fatal violence instantly. Bloodlines meant nothing. Even top-tier political immunity offered zero protection against his violent temper. During a heated family dispute, he pulled a weapon and shot Saddam's own uncle in the leg. Shooting a relative did not slow his rise. Previously, he relied purely on a small circle of personal bodyguards. Now, he started assembling his own paramilitary network. He took over Iraq's state media. He launched the Babil newspaper and set up youth television programs to broadcast his face to a country of 20 million people. Out on the streets, extreme supercars roared through Baghdad's avenues, forcing regular traffic aside. He formed the Fedayeen Saddam from scratch. This militia eventually grew to tens of thousands of armed fighters, all answering directly to him. The chaotic parties faded into the background as he focused on power. He controlled the daily news and commanded a massive private army. There were no boundaries left.
With no lines left to cross, Uday went straight after his father's inner circle. In 1988, he murdered Kamel Hana Gajayo right in front of a Baghdad crowd. Gajayo was not just a guard. He was Saddam's personal food taster and one of his most trusted men. The attack was loud, messy, and entirely public. For a moment, even Saddam had to react. Ignoring a dead loyalist made the dictator look weak. State police arrested Uday, and Saddam ordered him into exile. The official story framed it as strict justice, but the actual destination was Switzerland. Geneva was one of the safest, most expensive cities in Europe, making this supposed punishment look exactly like a luxury vacation. A regular citizen would have caught a bullet for touching the president's staff. Uday just waited in a safe haven. The state simply swept the blood under the rug. It took only a few months for the sentence to expire. Uday packed his bags and returned to Iraq. Coming back from Switzerland did not calm him down. The terror simply moved inside his own home, applying the exact same methods of fear to his family. 10 years earlier, his 1983 marriage to Nada produced 2 sons and a public image of stability. But by 1993, his new wife was a terrified 13-year-old girl. She was Saja, the daughter of Saddam Hussein's half-brother, Barzan al-Takriti. The Iraqi government saw these weddings as necessary political alliances. Uday saw them as hostage situations. He built his domestic life purely on psychological pressure. There was no separation between his public power and his private violence. Nada eventually ran away to escape the daily abuse inside their house. The 13-year-old lasted exactly 3 months before fleeing the compound entirely. She immediately reported severe beatings. Royal status offered zero protection. Living in his bedroom was just as dangerous as crossing him on the street.
His control required constant pain, and he did not care who received it. This environment swallowed his closest staff. Aides faced the exact same daily threat as his wives. Displeasing the boss meant guards dragged them into a basement room. Guards used the traditional falaka method, beating aides on the soles of their feet with heavy industrial cables. It was a calculated tactic that made walking completely impossible, but it kept their faces intact for television appearances. The violence went far beyond physical blows. Aides sat at their desks, ordered to hold the telephone receiver tightly against their ears. Through the static, they listened to the screams of other victims being tortured. Being the president's son offered zero protection when the ambush finally came. A bright red Porsche cruised through Baghdad's elite Al-Mansour district on the evening of December 12, 1996, driving straight into a wall of crossfire. The sports car was built only for speed, carrying no armored plating or bulletproof glass. That structural flaw left the driver fully exposed to the waiting assault rifles. Heavy rounds hammered against the thin German steel, tearing through the doors in a matter of seconds. Inside the shattered cabin, Uday Hussein slumped down heavily onto the leather passenger seat, bleeding out. The attackers fired exactly 50 bullets into the vehicle. 17 of those rounds tore directly into his flesh. He survived the massive blood loss, but 2 bullets remained lodged deep inside his spine. Those few seconds of gunfire rewired the political landscape of Iraq.
Saddam Hussein had spent years tolerating his eldest son's chaotic violence, but a paralyzed heir was a major liability. The dictator quietly began shifting the family's balance of power toward his younger son. Uday's guaranteed future as the next ruler evaporated right there on the blood-soaked car seat. By the year 2000, Saddam officially named Qusay as the new political successor. 2 bullets lodged deep in the spine changed everything. Losing the political crown pushed his daily existence into a state of sheer, suffocating paranoia. The physical contrast was actually jarring to witness. He could barely walk with a cane. Often, he had to rely entirely on a wheelchair just to navigate his own secure compounds. Yet he desperately tried to maintain his previous lifestyle. He still threw massive, extravagant parties along the banks of the Tigris River. Alcohol flowed freely. He forced young women to attend these twisted celebrations against their will. But his underlying fear was completely consuming him. He began isolating himself from anyone he could not directly control. He started barricading his expensive sports cars inside hidden facilities. Guards listened to the heavy, echoing clang of garage doors, locking his vehicles away from perceived threats. The physical injuries just made his erratic character even more dangerous and volatile.
By the time he reached the age of 39, the untouchable playboy was entirely gone. Instead, a broken man sat in the shadows of his own making. His intense paranoia eventually poisoned his closest family ties. He viewed his younger sibling as a direct threat to his remaining influence. The relationship with Qusay deteriorated rapidly over those tense months. They grew completely distant, and each brother became highly suspicious of the other's power over Saddam. All familial loyalty simply evaporated under the weight of his constant suspicion. The brothers became enemies.
But even paranoia and a wheelchair did not stop his inner circle from committing new crimes. How did a cripple with a cane keep terrorizing the entire capital? Through a well-practiced network of loyal guards. They pulled young women straight from university campuses in broad daylight. The mechanics were painfully simple. Black cars rolled up to the gates. Armed men pointed at a student. They shoved her into the back seat, and she simply vanished. Baghdad held over 5 million people in the early 2000s, and every single resident understood these unspoken survival rules. By 2002, women actively avoided specific cafes and streets across the city. They did not change their routes because of official government laws. They stayed away out of sheer fear of catching his attention. A Lebanese beauty queen later noted how charming he could act during private conversations. That polite charm was just a thin mask for an established predator.
The dread reached directly into the ruling elite. Guards walked right into a formal high society gathering. They spotted a regional governor's daughter. She was exactly 14 years old. His men took her by the arms and pulled her toward the exit. The witnesses just stared at the floor. The entire room stood in dead silence while they took her away. She was mistreated and brought back later. Nobody tried to intervene or call for help. His name was a word people only whispered as a strict warning.
As soon as American troops entered Iraq in March 2003, that invisible wall of fear shattered. On April 9th, soldiers from the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division arrived in central Baghdad. They wrapped a heavy chain around Saddam Hussein's statue. An armored vehicle pulled the metal dictator down. It hit the concrete face first. The ruling family controlled every street corner for decades, but they lost Baghdad in a matter of days. The invasion moved forward with constant heavy pressure. Previous conflicts always ended with the ruling party tightening its grip on the population. This time, major cities fell one after another. Uday's personal protection evaporated as the front line collapsed under the weight of the Allied offensive. The vast security network no longer mattered. Guards stopped answering their radios. Street checkpoints stood completely empty across the capital. Intelligence officers abandoned their posts and went straight into hiding. With the intelligence network gone, former insiders finally broke their silence. What people once whispered in closed kitchens was now spoken openly. Local and international journalists filled the void. Tape recorders clicked constantly. Reporters filled hundreds of notepads with raw accounts. They sat with victims, documenting everything. Investigators began comparing these scattered stories. They matched names, dates, and locations. Human Rights Watch teams arrived to cross-reference the data. A clear pattern emerged. These weren't isolated crimes. Testimonies from hundreds of different people lined up perfectly. They revealed the internal rules of Hussein's circle: kidnappings, forced gatherings. The fear used to keep the entire Iraqi population in line was now documented across thousands of paper transcripts. The barrier was gone. Questioning Uday had previously meant a death sentence. Now, the men who once ran his security detail gave on-record interviews. Former government officials stood before rolling cameras and publicly admitted their guilt. While former insiders confessed on camera, the brothers were already running out of places to hide. Two aces in the American wanted deck. Uday was the ace of hearts, and Qusay was the ace of clubs. Their faces were printed on thousands of playing cards, distributed to every coalition patrol. The government they once controlled no longer existed, and their security forces simply melted away. Moving freely became impossible. For weeks, the brothers bounced between temporary safe houses. They relied on a rapidly shrinking network of loyalists to find shelter. But the ground was shifting beneath them. Old allies were either sitting in detention camps or too scared to help. The United States military intensified the hunt, putting a $15 million bounty on each brother. Every time they changed locations, they risked exposure to intelligence patrols or betrayal by their own people. By July 2003, the brothers reached the northern city of Mosul. The summer temperature routinely topped 40 degrees Celsius, and the heat radiating from the asphalt was heavy. On July 22nd, an informant finally made a phone call. A local businessman, who owned the very villa where the brothers were staying, decided he wanted the reward money. He passed the exact address to American intelligence officers. The military reacted within hours. Operators from Task Force 20 and soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division converged on the location. Convoys of armored Humvees rolled into the quiet residential neighborhood. Troops jumped out and blocked the intersections. They locked down a tight street perimeter around a large concrete house. The informant claimed both the ace of hearts and the ace of clubs were on the second floor.
Soldiers secured every possible escape route. They pointed their rifles at the closed windows. Translators stepped forward with megaphones and ordered the occupants to surrender. They did not come out.
Instead of raised hands, bullets tore from the upper windows, forcing American troops to duck behind their armored vehicles. The multi-hour standoff escalated fast as U.S. forces answered with heavy suppressing fire, using large-caliber machine guns to chew through the concrete facade. The brothers were heavily armed inside the Mosul house, but infantry rifles meant nothing against an advancing mechanized unit. Military commanders authorized heavy weapons to breach the fortified walls, bringing up Mark 19 grenade launchers to pound the second floor. Then came the final strike, as wire-guided tow missiles slammed directly into the building and ripped the entire shelter wide open. The roar of explosives and crushing concrete finally silenced the return fire. When assault teams moved in, they found the bodies of both Uday and Hussein among the smoking debris. Their physical destruction confirmed to terrified citizens that the old regime was permanently buried. But taking out the dictators did not magically erase the years of deeply inflicted damage. For countless female victims who survived their violent obsessions, the trauma outlasted the gunsmoke clearing over Mosul.